Once again, folks, always remember, check out Jersey First TV on all of our social media platforms. Make sure you like Real Talk with Fernando on Facebook, and of course, yours truly on Facebook. Also, don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at the same handle, at the Fernando Zone. And also check out Jersey First TV on their YouTube page. And now our episodes are available on Spotify and on SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcasts, whether you're working out, taking a bath, grading papers, driving down to the League of Municipalities like I will be. Guess what? Tune in, download the episodes, and you can check out not just my show, but all the great content brought to you by Jersey First TV. Certainly they're available for you. And folks, again, as I mentioned, certainly one of the reasons that this show does exceptionally well every week in all organic traffic is because of you, my loyal viewing audience, but also, and just as importantly, it's the exceptional and exclusive guests that I bring you every single week. And as I mentioned at the top of the program, obviously, we have a double main event here. And as someone, again, folks, and as a reminder, stay tuned because at the end of the show, I will announce this week's winners of the worst journalists in the week here in the state of New Jersey. There's always a lot to pick from. But you know what? One guy that I know is never going to be on my list because he's a guy that breaks news, writes exceptional columns, and he's a journalist that I respect. I'm hoping maybe even after today that he'll respect me as well, folks. He is the distinguished editor of the New Jersey Globe. You can check it out at newjerseyglobe.com. He is hopefully a fan of the show and of myself. The great David Wildstein joins us here tonight on Real Talk. David, how are you?
I'm well, Fernando. How are you?
Good to have with you. I know you don't do a lot of these, David, so I'm really privileged to have you on here. I read the New Jersey Globe daily, obviously. You're the one breaking news. And while everybody is sort of playing catch up, man, you're breaking news. You're getting the scoops that nobody else is doing it. Nobody else. I'll drop some names later in terms of like what news sites, but no one's really doing the job that New Jersey Globe is doing. David, I have to ask you, what's the secret here? What's in the sauce, man? What makes New Jersey Globe the success that it is?
First of all, I think it's hard work. I think it's knowing that you have to work every single day to talk to people and find out what's going on, build relationships, and it's treating people with respect. It's not getting up in the morning and saying, how am I going to mess with somebody today? It's a back and forth in terms of finding information, verifying it, making sure it's accurate, and then going with it. As you have to have a relationship with your audience, and they have to trust you, and they have to know that if you say something, that it's accurate and that it's fair and that it's been vetted.
And Dave, you're the guy that really gets the scoops. You're the one that, again, gets to host all the debates. I've only moderated a couple forums. I mean, it's like you're on this mountain, dude. Like everyone talks to you. All the debates go through the New Jersey Globe. I mean, again, it's amazing. And I get it. Listen, and I'm sure maybe you'll get some grief for this. Yeah. I know I'm going to. I'll get some grief. Like, oh, Fernando, I can't believe you had Wildstein on. I say it consistently. I talk to everybody in this state. I try to, at least. And I talk to the people that are making news, but more importantly, breaking news. And that's what the Globe does, I think, better than anybody, David. And I think that's what's helped distinguish your brand of journalism. Again, I'm opinion journalism. I'm not breaking news like you are. You do write columns. You do have some opinion pieces, no doubt. You do streaming as well with segments. Obviously, you have a great thing with WABC Radio in New York, with what you do with the Globe, obviously streaming online. But what you're doing, I think, is very different, where we're not seeing other news sites breaking stories anymore. Again, when it comes to polling, when it comes to breaking news, you're really at the top of the food chain and really at the front of the line. Does that bring you some vitriol?
It does. It does. I mean, it brings me, and you're very kind to say it. You really are. But it concerns me also. It saddens me that the old media, that the old print newspapers that are failing so miserably, that they're not doing that they're allowing other people to come in. They are bigger. They have more bodies. They should be spread out and talking to exponentially more people than I do. But it's all about priorities. And look, I mean, I don't, there's some free market issues here too. These newspapers are for-profit companies. They're in it to make a profit. And if what it takes to keep the lights on at a Newark-based daily newspaper is to talk about where to get good pizza and what the best hair salon is, and proms and bagels. If that's what it takes, then that's what they got to do. It's their business. They have a right to cover what they want to cover. But what bothers me is that they sometimes will present themselves to be the leading authority and then not do anything. It drives me crazy. I'm sure it does you too. You know, a couple of days before the election, you'll see a story saying, here's everything you need to know about the 11th district congressional race, except for the fact that they didn't cover it at all for months and months and months. And that's frustrating. You know, I worked for the Star Ledger. I was a paper boy for the Star Ledger. I was a sports correspondent for them in the mid and late 1970s. They paid me to report on high school sports. I used to get up early on a Sunday morning and read their opinion columns. So you know, the fact that some people are kind enough to think that the New Jersey Globe is beating them, that doesn't bring me tremendous pleasure. It makes me concerned about where are these journalists and why aren't they covering local news and why aren't they holding people more accountable? No,
well said, David. And folks, if you're just joining us right now, it's 6:37 here on the East Coast. Tonight's double main event, folks. Joining me now live is the distinguished editor of the New Jersey Globe, David Wildstein, here on Real Talk via Jersey First TV. David, you mentioned something about old media, and we'll get to that in a moment, but I really want to pick your brain. I had the pleasure of appearing with you last week on a great show with Joey Block, fellow Rutgers alumnus, in the middle on Fox Sports Radio in New Jersey. We had great back and forth last week dissecting what happened last Tuesday. We're approaching a week now, and we're seeing the election results. It seems like Republicans are going to have the slimmest of majorities in the House. I believe 219 to 216, I think, maybe when it's all said and done. The Senate stayed with the Democrats. But something that we talked about last week on the other show, and I really wanted to sort of delve into with you here tonight, was I think that polling was also another victim during this election season, because polling told us consistently you have an immensely unpopular president. You had inflation, food prices, gas prices. It was just everything was working. You had crime waves on the rise in cities. Again, I live in Hudson County. I look at Manhattan every day. I've seen what's happened to Manhattan under former Mayor de Blasio, now Eric Adams, former Governor Cuomo, and now, unfortunately, reelected Governor Kathy Hochul. And I'm thinking to myself, how did Republicans, or how did pollsters get this so wrong, where Republicans didn't have the red tsunami that I expected? It was barely a ripple. And I think that maybe polling has to be reassessed. David, is that fair to say?
It's absolutely fair. And you're spot on correct. The polling has been off. I hear it from both sides. Democrats complain, Republicans complain. They don't agree with the independent polls. They even question their own independent polling or their own internal polling. This is all about modeling. And if you get the model wrong, the numbers are going to be wrong. And modeling being turnout. And if you can't, it's no good to poll, 6 people at a diner booth if 4 of them aren't going to come out and vote. So that cutoff of likely voters, making sure that the people you're polling represent what that snapshot in time is going to be on election day is really important. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I'm starting to look at is the people that I believe are not the pollsters. It's the data guys. It's the Steve Kornacki, New Jersey alum. It's David Wasserman at Cook Political Report. It's the people that are making their projections, voicing their opinions based upon voter history and what they're seeing in terms of numbers and demographics. Those are the ones that got this election day right.
And David, I think that also maybe someone needs to say this out loud. I don't mind saying it out loud. I say a lot of things out loud. Maybe I shouldn't. But, when you think about the modeling of answering phone calls, answering texts, I mean, again, we live in a very transient time where people's attention span isn't very good anymore. The idea that, and listen, young voter turnout, I think, was the deciding factor in a lot of races congressionally around the country. I think, Generation Z, 18 to maybe 25, I think, made a big difference. Millennials to some extent too. But when it comes to polling, I think we might have to sort of reassess how to better do it because, listen, people don't answer phone calls. I mean, I look at my phone and I get there are a lot of apps now that tell you if there's a spam risk on this phone call. A lot of people don't want to be on the phone very long. A lot of people won't take phone calls. A lot of people won't answer texts. And I think that maybe that's the model that people think, well, we still have to continue with this. I think like anything else, I think something has to change. Something has to be upgraded. But quite frankly, I'm not the expert here. You're more of it. Is there a solution to this?
I don't know. I don't really know. What I know is that we have to all take in consideration also who we're talking to. You and I, we live inside a bubble. We all live inside these bubbles where we talk to each other, and the sounds within the bubble just they reverberate, from piece to piece, and we're all talking to the same people. People who are undecided voters, they're not as concerned as you and I are. They don't run to, they don't look at an ad on television and then rewind the ad to watch it a couple more times. They're not running out to grab look at their mailbox and see, oh, here's the political mail. Let me look at that first. They're not in search of information the same way people that are involved are. And so part of it is we've all got to start to listen to different people than just everybody else that's inside the same bubble that we all occupy.
I'm with you. And what was really frustrating, and folks, by the way, again, it's 6:40 here on the East Coast. Sharing is caring. Click that share button there if you're tuning in right now on Facebook Live, via StreamYard, also on YouTube. Share it, folks. It takes 2 seconds. And joining me here tonight, live as the second half of tonight's double main event, the editor of the New Jersey Globe, David Wildstein, here on Real Talk via Jersey First TV. David, it's interesting because here in New Jersey, I mean, I was realistic. I thought that the Battle of the Toms was the one district I thought that realistically was going to flip. I was trying to be optimistic. I'd interviewed Paul DeGroot a few weeks back. I liked him. I've talked him off the air. Good guy, genuine guy who worked in law enforcement as a prosecutor. Again, I think a casualty of maybe the NJGOP or the National or the RNC not putting money into that campaign. But on the flip side, someone like Bob Healy, where a lot of money was thrown at that race, some of his own personal finance as well. And that race wasn't close. I was surprised at that one. I thought that maybe, again, Frank Pallone, and I had called Rob Menendez Jr. to win his race. I had called Josh Gottheimer to win his race. I thought Frank Pallotta might give him a little bit of a battle, but I said that Josh is going to win that race. That wasn't even close. Neither was Healy. Neither was Pallone's challenger. Neither was the one that was close, obviously, that didn't win, and we talked about it last week, was Billy Premp against Bill Pascrell. That was within 10 points, and that was a surprise for many for a campaign that wasn't very well funded.
Yeah, I was surprised too. And look, I think one of the obvious things here is that the map, the congressional map, I always ask permission when I say this to see if I'm allowed to use the G word on your show. But
sure,
this was a gerrymandered map. Gerrymandering is in the eye of the beholder. Sometimes Democrats complained about a Republican gerrymandered map. In this case, it's Republicans claiming about a Democratic gerrymandered map. And this map performed exactly as it was designed to. It was designed to sacrifice one incumbent, Tom Malinowski, in order to protect three others, Andy Kim and Josh Gottheimer and Mikey Sherrill. And that's what it did. It keeps that 7th district seat. It's competitive. It'll be competitive maybe through the decade. And districts 3, 5, and 11, they're not so competitive. They weren't drawn to be that way. And I think that's what's happening with Billy Prempa. The interesting thing to me there is you've got Bill Pascrell. He was a dutiful Democrat. He said, I've got so much excess margin that I can win by that I don't really care about. Give me some more Republican areas. I'll absorb it in order to help Gottheimer, in order to help Sherrill, in order to help make that whole map work. And then he felt it. But, there's this old adage, Fernando, do you know what they call a congressman who wins his election by one vote?
Winner.
They call him congressman. So it doesn't really matter. So you got Pascrell. He won. This was the lowest margin he's won by since he beat an incumbent, Bill Martini, in 1996. But at the end of the day, what does he care? He's 85 years old. He's going back to Congress for another 2 years. He's going to take it one term at a time. And I think part of the reality is that we're looking at simply this was a Republican. He raised more money than any other Republican spent in 26 years in that district. But at the end of the day, he also cost them a lot of money to raise it. So he didn't spend really that much more on voter persuasion. I think it was a function of a new district, of some better areas for Republicans, the places that Gottheimer and Sherrill didn't want. That Pascrell put up his hand and says, "I'll take them for you." And Pascrell didn't have an opportunity to define Billy Prempa. If he had gone negative on him, maybe it would have been different. If Prempa had more money, it would have been different. So I don't know. I mean, you tell me if you think, and I shouldn't do this on your show asking you a question, but
no, go ahead, please, go ahead.
But absolutely. Think about it. Think if they took, if instead of the money that was spent, and I'm not saying party money, but I'm saying, raise money into Pallotta, into Sue Kiley, into Paul DeGroot. What if it was all put into the 9th district, if it was all put into Billy Prempa? And suddenly now Pascrell's looking at FEC reports and saying, "Oh my God, this guy's got $1.5 million, $2 million. I better do something." Do you think the outcome might have been a closer race, or do you think it might have been a wider margin for him?
I think it might have been somewhat closer, David. But again, and we talked about this last week when we were on Joey Block's show, Democrats have just done a great job over the last few years of registering more Democrats. Their ground game has just gotten efficiently better. Don't get me started on vote by mail, because I'm going to say some things that are probably going to get me in trouble. But they just have gotten really efficient at it. And I would just argue that I think there needs to be a little accountability here on Bob Hugin. I don't know if you listened a little bit to the end of my interview with Belleville Mayor Michael Melham, but I think there needs to be some focus on Bob Hugin. Again, and I'm not auditioning for a job. I'm not trying to be state chair. I'm very busy working in higher education, working in media. Believe me, I'm busy. Okay. Philanthropy. I'm a busy guy. I'm not trying to be the next NJGOP chair. But I think there needs to be some, not reckoning, but some accountability here about what Bob Hugin's going to do effective now on. Next year, there are legislative races. And to your point, I think that maybe we need to look at what he didn't do right in this cycle. Yes, he can hang his hat on Tom Kean Jr. winning, but there were other races that were winnable. Whether maybe he should have made more money from the RNC. Maybe he should have recruited better, had more volunteers. It's easy for me to Monday morning quarterback this, David, like a lot of us can try to do. But I just think that there needs to be some accountability on Bob Hugin, and I don't think that there is right now. I'm not trying to call for his head. Let's not get it twisted, folks. I just think there needs to be a little more accountability on him, because there were some races that were winnable.
Well, I don't know. I think one of the places where Bob Hugin was very effective for Republicans was in fundraising. He saw to it that some county races were fully funded. I thought Gloucester County for sure was going to flip red. And if not for Democrats getting a wake-up call last year and realizing we could lose the whole enchilada, we could lose control of the courthouse, the county clerk, they're already down 2 commissioners, they're already down a sheriff. It would have been a seismic shift right in former Senate President Steve Sweeney's backyard. So they regrouped and they figured out what they needed to do to win, and they just pumped the hell out of early voting and vote by mail, and that's where they got it. But and they get props for recognizing the problem. In politics, if you have to be told that your hair's on fire, then it is too late. You can't recover. And so, but Hugin did well there. He they over 6 figures going into a Republican super PAC. He put some of his own money in. They took control in Cumberland County, and this was, if what Republicans needed in New Jersey this year was they needed to ride a wave. New Jersey, face it, it's a blue state. There's 1 million more Democrats than there are Republicans. That'll go down once all the voter purging is done in February or March. But it's a Democratic state. And the only way Republicans were going to overcome that was to ride a wave. If the wave wasn't there, then a lot of these races just were never winnable for them.
No, absolutely, David. Folks, it's 6:48 here on the East Coast. Here, we're wrapping up shortly here with the editor of the New Jersey Globe, David Wildstein, joining us here on Jersey First TV on Real Talk with Fernando Uribe. David, it's election day is come and gone, but now we start thinking about 2023 legislative races. Obviously, a little bit, not an indictment, but maybe a report on how the governor's doing. Again, I was the only journalist last year that called that race and said Jack is going to give him a fight. There are plenty of pockets in New Jersey where the emperor, I'm sorry, it's a Freudian slip. I keep saying it all the time. I have to get away from that. The emperor, sorry, you see, I did it again, was only going to win by 3 or 4 points. And everyone said, Fernando, you're crazy. Murphy's going to win this in a romp. I said, he got COVID wrong. I think we learned that already. We've seen how great states like Florida did it with Ron DeSantis. Thank God he got reelected. Same thing in Texas. Thank God that Greg Abbott got reelected. But it seemed like blue governors, and I hate to be tribal about this. I'm not trying to be tribal about science, but it just seemed like blue governors like Phil Murphy, Andrew Cuomo, and then Kathy Hochul, and then Lamont, whatever, got it wrong about COVID. And I thought that, hey, this is where Jack can really maybe pull off the upset. And to say nothing of the fact that I think 35% of registered Republicans came out last November. That's the reason, I would argue, one of them, why we're seeing Governor Phil Murphy and not Governor Jack Ciattarelli. Republicans just stayed home because they just tend to be tribal, David. It's aggravating. If you want to change New Jersey from this one-party system for almost 20 years in the legislature, and yeah, there have been some more Republican governors and Democratic governors, but Republicans don't seem to get off their ass and want to vote. And I think that's what dooms them, David.
Yeah, turnout in some places helped Ciattarelli, in some places, urban turnout was way down. That contributed to the margins being close, but suburban, white, highly educated, liberal-leaning suburban towns turned out in huge numbers for Murphy, and those are places that Republicans have lost. I mean, I think Maplewood gave Phil Murphy more votes than the South Ward and Newark did. So Ciattarelli also benefited from some lethargic turnout on that side also. And I think going into 2023, this is that cycle. This is the point where there's no marquee name at the head of the ticket. You think that Congress doesn't turn people out to vote when there's no president or U.S. Senate candidate out there. Watch these cycles where the state legislature heads the ticket, and that has an opportunity for some upsets. And Republicans, for the first time since the 1990s, have a map where there is a path to a majority. It's a narrow path. Everything has to go right, but it's there.
No, you're absolutely right. David, one of the things, and we'll get back to sort of 2023 in a moment, but I just want to ask you, I have a pretty thick skin. I know you have a thick skin,
yeah.
But what's the secret? Because again, I mean, whether or not you want to answer this or not, it's up to you. But I mean, obviously columns can be written at any time. I know your friend Tom Moran had a little bit to say today in the Star Ledger about you. Yeah. I know he's taking you to task, maybe even threatening legal action against you. How do you deal with that sort of, not chicanery, but that venom and vitriol from people like Tom, who I've gone after too? I think he's a full-blown leftist. I go after Alan Steinberg, another clown that I have no problem calling out in Jersey media.
Alan Steinberg, always wrong. He's reliable that way.
Listen, Alan Steinberg is about as reliable as his New York Mets are in October. Let's be honest about it. So this is the thing, though, David. I have a thick skin? I know you do as well. Is it just practice? I mean, what's the key to not getting your feathers ruffled? Again, just seeing a column like today that Tom Moran and the Star Ledger published about you, taking some jabs at you. How do you handle that? And like with grace, do you try to fight back?
I don't care. I mean, Tom has been like this. He's a bully. He's always been a bully. He doesn't do well when people call him out. He wrote his column in retaliation for one that I wrote this morning that said that Tom Moran's editorial board just doesn't have the clout that it used to. And I think there's some fact there. I think there's some fact. And these guys, their business model is failing miserably. And some of these guys have to just take some responsibility for the fact that people aren't reading them for a reason. So
Yeah.
I don't care what Tom Moran has to say. And and by the way, that's a bipartisan thing. You've had two governors in a row, Chris Christie and Phil Murphy. They don't care what Tom Moran has to say. So, and you get old. This is my I'm finishing my 49th year in New Jersey politics. I started very young, but this is my 49th year. And I've had smarter people take shots at me than Tom Moran. So I don't care.
David, you don't look a day over 40. What's going on here? Moisturizer, what's going on here? What's up? I mean, really?
I started real young, but I was there. So
wow, I'll tell you. Do me a favor, text me that moisturizer you're using because it's working, brother. I gotta say. Any validity to that in the column today about legal action that he has a legal case or anything like that? Or is that just hot air by Tom?
I used his legal action is that I used the photo of him on an Instagram post. He's a public figure. And he posted it on a social media site, and I used his photo. This is just another example. Tom Moran is just a big, big baby. Can't take it, can dish it out, can punch people in the face, but God forbid you come over and say, Tom Moran, you did something wrong. He gets, he gets all defensive. He can't take it. I wouldn't want to be in his position. I wouldn't be wanting to be working for a place where you work hard and you write things and people don't read what you write and hiding behind some paywall. So, if it makes Tom Moran feel a little bit better as a human being to take some shots and to retaliate, let him. What do I care?
Fair enough. Good point there about Tom Moran and the Star Ledger. You brought up a good point, though, David, about old media and sort of the model that I think the Star Ledger exemplifies, the Bergen Record, and a lot of these sort of old school institutions where, listen, I'm a guy that still likes to go to my front porch and get the paper because I'm a sports guy. I like to read the sports first and then read it, but that's not the media we live in anymore. Again, social media has changed dramatically the way we consume news, going back to the mid 2000s with the creation of Facebook. And then a few years later, actually the year after, with YouTube and then Twitter and then Instagram and then Snapchat, TikTok, et cetera, et cetera. It just seems, websites, not physically, tangibly reading a paper. Print circulations have gone way down. I think it's really an indictment of the fact that, as you said, it is a for-profit model. I think people are getting away from that. And that's why a lot of these institutions, A, are no longer profitable like they used to be, and B, people aren't reading them and they're relying on alternative news sites like yours and others for their news. And quite frankly, I think it's tragic because, again, I love physically reading the news. That's just something we're not doing anymore, David.
We're not, and part of it is you've got to change with the times. I mean, I don't see a fax machine in your shot behind you, but there was a point where we couldn't live without. Faxes were new technology. We all couldn't live without it. You got to change. You got to keep current. And this idea that they're going to print something in a newspaper and deliver it to people's homes, with the idea that you will not have seen it. I mean, I remember I'd get up, and I was a political junkie, as I said, from a young age, but I still went to the sports section first because the only way to know how all the teams did the night before was to look at it in the paper the next day. We don't need them anymore for that. And there's so many things we don't need them for, but I remember, again, I'm going to age myself, but as a young councilman and mayor, I was elected 38 years ago. I would have a council meeting and you'd have two daily newspapers and a weekly newspaper there, and they were covering what you did. And people were concerned about what the newspaper said. An editorial, got us all frightened if somebody was poking around. Newspapers kept in the old days, they kept people honest. And now, if nobody's reading the newspapers, what do you care what they write? And that's a problem for democracy.
Absolutely. And David, before I let you go, I know you have something coming up at the bottom of the hour, and I appreciate your time. David, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I definitely want to have you back on again soon. I think I've been a fair, interviewer. I don't think I think we've had some fun here, man, dissecting this political climate. Is that?
I think you're a good guy. I don't have any. I have no qualms with you. You're good and you're fair, and that's how it's supposed to be. And you know what you do is extremely meaningful. You're reaching an audience and you're presenting a point of view that people can't get everywhere, and that's so important. That's what old media used to do. They would bring both sides together and present the facts. That's all really what we want, is a voter to get both sides of a position presented to them fairly and accurately, and then let them decide who they want. Now, you know, I'll say this if I'm not going over too much, but that's but I remember I did a debate in the 3rd district between Bob Healy and the incumbent Andy Kim, and you know, I said something at the end. I said I might get in a little trouble for this. It's not usually what I do, but here you had 2 candidates, young candidates, 40 years old and 39 years old, and they're running for Congress in a competitive, it was supposed to be a competitive race. And I got to know them both, and they're both good guys. They're both decent human beings. They're family men. They're professionals. They're smart. And the difference is they had divergent views on
lost David there.
How the correction.
Are you with us?
Do you have me back?
I don't know if I lost Dave there.
I hear you.
Okay. Dave, are you there?
Yeah. You hear me?
I'm sorry about that. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah.
Please continue.
I don't know where I cut off, but I was just saying in the 3rd district, you had 2 really good candidates. They believed in different things. So their job was to take their divergent beliefs to the voters and let the voters decide which one they want. And how great is that for democracy when political parties do their job and they both put up good people? That's exactly what it's supposed to be like.
David, well said. Before I let you go, David, again, I want to thank you for your time. I know you don't do a lot of these, but I appreciate you want to come on this show. I think it speaks volumes about respecting this show and respecting Jersey First TV, and I appreciate your time. I'll give you the last word here.
No, I just, repeat it again. What you do, what Joey Block does, what young, reporters all over the country just trying to bring news in their own way, do it fairly, do it squarely, do it effectively, do it honestly, and everything's going to work out fine. So I thank you for everything that you're doing.
Well, David, thank you for the kind words, and I look forward. I'll definitely reach out after the league and maybe after the holidays and get you back on. Let's do this again, man. I've enjoyed the breakdown here.
Thank you very much.
Have a good one. If I don't talk to you again, have a great holiday. We'll talk to you soon here on Jersey First.
You too. Good night.
Take care, David.